In this session, Troy Haas, CEO of HopeQuest Ministry Group and author of numerous resources for the journey towards freedom from addiction, will explain to us the addiction cycle and how our brains trick us into dealing with distress and uncomfortable emotions in unhealthy ways.
I'm going to talk to you about one of the biggest, most difficult challenges facing the church and pastors and leaders today: donuts. I have a very long and difficult relationship with Krispy Kreme donuts. I didn't grow up around Krispy Kreme donuts. I'd never heard of Krispy Kreme donuts until I was at a conference in Central Florida. On that trip, I discovered the Hot Now light, and it became a beacon of hope and relief for me. And when that light was on, every evening after that conference, I would run in and I would get some hot Krispy Kreme donuts. Well, fast forward a few years, about 7 years ago to be exact, and a Krispy Kreme donuts opened in my town. Every single day I would drive home from my office and I would have to pass the Krispy Kreme donuts. They had a giant sign in the air, as high as could be, and that sign, as I would be coming home from work, I would feel overwhelmed. I would feel inadequate. I would just feel this host of difficult, challenging emotions, and I would think, you know what I need? I need some donuts. And so I would be tempted as I drove further down the road, and I would pray, God, help me turn left, help me turn left, help me not go forward to the donuts. But there were days when I would go forward to the donuts. I would pull into the drive-thru, I would order a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts, and there was an empty lot next door, and I would pull into that lot, and I would back my truck in, I would turn on some classic rock music, I'd roll down my windows, and I'd have a donut. It'd make me feel a little better. I'd have a second donut, and it would make me feel a little better. After about 6 donuts, I was feeling full, but then I've got this box of half-eaten donuts. And if I come home with a box of half-eaten donuts, my wife is going to say, "What have you been doing?" So I had to hide it. So I decided just to eat the other 6, and then I would take the empty box and I would throw it into the trash. This went on for quite a while until finally I was able to overcome my addiction to donuts. What I want to describe to you today that is true in my relationship with donuts, but it's also true in my past history with drugs and substances and alcohol. It's also true in my past relationship with pornography and sexual addiction, and that is the addiction cycle. And the addiction cycle is important to understand because if we can understand how this works, we can then invite God into this cycle and find real and lasting freedom. So the cycle works a bit like this. There is an emotional trigger. Something happens that triggers emotions. And that emotional trigger then activates a craving. And as I begin to feel that craving, I all of a sudden am tempted to relieve this difficult emotion by that craving. And then at some point, a ritual starts. After it gets going, it's very, very difficult to stop. And ultimately, that ritual ends in me acting out, whether that's eating donuts or looking at porn or whatever it is that I'm addicted to. And then very quickly after acting out, any sense of relief is quickly gone, and I just feel the consequences of that. I feel shame. I feel embarrassment. I feel, I've blown it again. What am I going to do? And that then pushes me up to another emotional trigger, and then all of a sudden, this cycle is repeating itself over and over again, and I'm stuck. And much like Paul says in the Bible, there are these things that I don't want to do, but because of this cycle, I find myself doing them over and over again. You see, this cycle is the result of our brains and our flesh internalizing a plan to deal with distress and uncomfortable emotions. And in this cycle, these difficult emotions are actually ignited by beliefs, not true beliefs, false beliefs. For instance, I believe I'm a bad and worthless person. I believe that no one will take care of me if I don't take care of myself, and so on and so on. So these beliefs ignite these distressing emotions, and then these emotions fuel my behaviors. And if I can understand that cycle and how this works, then I'm able to, again, invite Jesus into the midst of that and seek to find some true and lasting freedom. The problem with this cycle, though, is we are not consciously aware of it. It is running in the background, kind of like software runs our phones, or software runs many of the devices that are helpful to us. We're not even aware that is running in the background, and we're not aware that we have explicit or direct control over the situation. It feels as if, because of this cycle, it feels as if I don't even have a choice. And so the reality is, in this cycle, we must choose to exit the cycle. And the truth of the matter is, we have to exit the cycle before the ritual starts. Because if we don't exit the cycle before the ritual starts, it's very, very difficult to stop it until acting out and consequences and more difficult emotions roll all the way around. The truth is, at any point before the ritual, I can choose to exit that cycle. Now let's talk about that cycle and my donuts again for a moment. Now think about this. The emotional trigger for me was a very difficult day at work. I'm leading people, I'm ministering to others, I'm trying to help find money for payroll and fix this problem and address this challenge, and something happens and I walk away from work feeling distressing emotions. I feel overwhelmed. I feel afraid. I feel inadequate. Maybe someone has spoken to me in a way that just made me feel dismissed. That emotion becomes a trigger that ignites and starts this cycle. Now, I'm driving down the road, and on a good day, when everything's gone well at work, I don't even think about the Krispy Kreme as I'm approaching that intersection. I don't even consider. But on a rough day, when that emotional trigger has happened, now all of a sudden, before I even get to the target, I'm thinking about, man, I wonder if the hot now light's on. I wonder if I can get just a few Krispy Kreme donuts. And then that temptation rises up in me, and all of a sudden now I'm white knuckles onto my steering wheel thinking, Troy, you can't go straight to the Krispy Kreme. You've got to turn left. Troy, turn left. And I may even breathe a prayer. God, help me turn left. But then I get to that light, and I succumb to the temptation, and I go forward. At that point, the ritual has started. I pull into the Krispy Kreme. I buy my dozen. I pull over into the empty parking lot. And that ritual is going to unfold itself, and it's going to be very, very difficult for me to stop at that point. So I act out. I feel overwhelmed. I feel ashamed. I feel embarrassed. I hate that once again I've given in to this thing that I don't want to do. That addiction cycle not only plays itself out with donuts, it can play itself out with anything that we use in our lives to manage the difficult emotions that we face. And it is certainly true with the issue of pornography. And when we feel emotionally triggered and we begin to crave connection and relationship and relief, the temptation to look at porn is a very, very real temptation. And then if there's a ritual that we go through, getting out our phones, finding an alone private place, maybe waiting for the family to go to bed, whatever the case may be, once that ritual starts, it's very, very difficult to stop. So my encouragement today in recognizing this addiction cycle, if you will, is to realize that there is a choice point. And you can, at any point from emotional trigger to craving to temptation, all the way up until that ritual starts. But you can choose to step out of that cycle and back onto the path of freedom. And that path is a path that we really can walk. I don't have to run to the hot now sign. I don't have to get relief from donuts. I can truly walk the path to freedom.